I know some of you swear by stretch resolution, but today I'm going to prove to you with data from both high and low end PCs why you should never use a stretch resolution in Fortnite. At the very start of Fortnite, changing your resolution worked entirely different from the way it does today. When you lowered your X resolution, it would increase your overall FOV, giving you a competitive advantage against other players. But in order to keep competitive integrity, they changed this so that you can never increase your FOV. So now when you lower your X resolution, instead of it rendering more in the Y direction, it lowers your FOV and stretches it to the length of your screen. Even if you get an ultra wide 21:9 monitor, it'll give you extra FOV in creative, but as soon as you queue in for arena or tournaments, it crops the side so you're limited to the 16:9 aspect ratio. But at least since you're rendering less pixels, you'll get more FPS, except you actually don't. See, I tested a bunch of different resolutions all the way from 1440p ultra wide all the way down to 720p. Testing on both GPU and display scaling, the results speak for themselves. Even though the highest resolution is rendering over 5 times as many pixels as the lowest resolution, there's no difference in FPS. This didn't make any sense to me, and I thought I must have made a mistake somewhere until I realized that it's because Fortnite's CPU bound in most cases. When running Fortnite on competitive settings, your CPU can't compute frames as fast as your GPU can render them anyway, so as long as you're CPU bound, it doesn't matter what your resolution is because your GPU is usually waiting for the CPU anyway. My PC that I'm testing on has a Ryzen 5 3600 and an RTX 3060. For those of you that don't know PCs, it's a mid-range CPU and a high-end GPU. So I went and got my brother's old laptop to test the hypothesis. It's a Microsoft Surface with a 6600U using integrated graphics since it doesn't have a graphics card in it. And sure enough, changing the resolution made a massive difference on his computer. Here, if we reduce the pixel count by 25%, the average FPS increases by 10%. And when we reduce the pixel count by 36%, the FPS increases by 15%. Since this computer is currently GPU bound unlike most, lowering the resolution will increase the FPS. But notice how I say lowering the resolution and not using stretch res. Even if you have a weak GPU and do benefit from lower resolutions, you should never stretch your resolution. Always keep the same 16:9 aspect ratio so that you don't lose FOV when lowering your resolution. So instead of 1750 by 1080, you should use 1744 by 981. And instead of 1680 by 1050, use 1680 by 945. You get the benefit of lowering your resolution without losing any FOV. So for most of you watching this, sticking to native will be your best option. But if you're on a low-end PC, lower your resolution to one of the ones with a 16:9 aspect ratio to increase your FPS. If you're not sure whether you're CPU bound or not, open Task Manager, set it to always on top, then play Fortnite and see if your GPU is maxing out close to 100%. If it is, then you can make use of lowering your resolution. If it's not, then stick to native. I'm not going to show how to change your resolution since there are already a ton of YouTube videos about it, but I know a lot of you will ask whether to use GPU or display scaling. There's pretty much no actual data online I could find about it. Some people say display scaling has lower input delay, but after trying them both, I couldn't find any statistically significant difference. If there is one, it's so small, like less than a millisecond, and not worth changing your entire desktop resolution, the possibility of black screening your PC, and everything else. I'd recommend the easier GPU scaling method. If you're sticking to native, but still want an FPS boost, that's what my last video was all about. I show you stuff like why you shouldn't cap your frame rate, why you should set your render distance to medium, and go through all the best video settings in Fortnite. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. Farewell.